Hello, welcome to episode of In the Trench with Gang Green. I'm your host, Blair, also known as Bubbs. Today we are joined by a very special guest, Jets reporter for the New York Daily News, Antwan Staley. Antwan, how's it going, man?
I'm all right. How are you doing?
Doing good, doing good. Really excited to get into all things New York Jets today on the podcast. I wanted to start off with, obviously, we'll get into the roster and offensively and defensively, but I wanted to start off with just from your perspective so far, going back to the offseason when the Jets walked off the field in Miami, knowing that there was a clear need at quarterback, to where we are now, covering Aaron Rodgers, covering the whole Rodgers offseason stuff from the interview on Pat McAfee to the introductory press conference to where we are now. Just what has that been like for you to cover Aaron Rodgers up to this point, a future Hall of Fame quarterback, and the excitement around this team as a reporter for obviously the Jets?
I mean, I think, covering Aaron has been fun. I mean, it's been cool. I mean, just like I've been doing this for a long time. Not necessarily covering the Jets, but just covering
Mm-hmm.
NFL things. But he's been fine. Like he's been, I think he's really changed the culture of the organization, and I think everybody's kind of buying into this mentality that they can win a Super Bowl championship, or at least contend in the AFC. I think. The thing about it was, from that point on, when they, essentially got eliminated against Seattle the week before.
Yeah.
Like you said, they had quarterback needs, and it took them like from that point on, which was like beginning of January until
Mm-hmm.
April. So literally like 3-4 months, nearly before they thought they got everything official with Aaron
Yeah.
Rodgers. That was kind of a long drawn out process, but I think once they we figured out Aaron was going to be the guy, especially after they let Derek Carr sign with the Saints. Then yeah, I think at that point we kind of knew like what it was going to be about, and all the attention and the scrutiny and everything that kind of came with it.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the biggest concerns going in was how committed would Rodgers obviously be with the young guys. We saw how it ended in Green Bay. And that's kind of where I want to follow into with the next question here is what has his impact so far been on this team? We've obviously from the outside, it's been very positive with you see him going over to the young guys, coaching them up to the defensive side of the football as well. But even just inside the building, internally, inside the locker room, just the energy and the leadership that he's brought to this locker room so far, something that this organization has desperately needed at the quarterback spot. What has that been like so far with his impact on this locker room and the team as a whole?
I think it's been. I mean, kind of what you see is kind of what you're getting, in a locker room, and with the organization. It's been a total culture change basically at will. We talk about a guy that's used to winning and has a certain standard of winning. And I actually quoted this in one of my articles. I was like, Mike Tomlin obviously says this a lot. Like the standard is the standard, and basically, he has a certain standard that he usually follows by and has been, doing for X amount of years. The Jets haven't, been to that standard in a very long time, but
Yeah.
having somebody like him and having somebody like Alan Lazar and Randall Cobb and, even, Tim Boyd to a certain extent too, they used to, that culture in Green Bay where they've competed,
Yeah.
for championships or, at least been contenders at trying to get to the Super Bowl and things of that nature too, a place that, the Jets haven't been for a little while. So, when you have somebody like that, it just brings another type of confidence that, you can do it because you have a guy, future Hall of Fame quarterback that's actually done it, and B, a guy that's held a certain standard for us a very long time. So I just think it's giving this team a added boost of confidence that they desperately needed or haven't had really since the Rex Ryan days.
Yeah, totally. And I guess too, do you get this sense from, this locker room that, even though there is so much expectations and stuff that they have kind of, I guess, in a way, still going about their business and still going about it, that they've got a lot of obviously work to do. It's still a very tough AFC. Do you still feel like this team's not in a way like Rodgers and obviously everybody in this locker room, the coaching staff is making sure that these guys don't get too overconfident with the expectations and the all the media and obviously the storylines around this team?
Well, I think that at least externally they've said that they understand this work to be done, and they understand that nothing's going to be given to them, especially considering people are. I think Robert Sala kind of said this the other day. People are kind of nipping at their heels, and
Yeah.
because I mean they've been the media darlings like all season, really
Yeah.
since they got Aaron Rodgers. I mean,
Hmm.
they're playing in metropolitan New York area, and
Yeah.
some people don't necessarily like the attention that they've gotten. They believe that
Yeah.
they're kind of like what Denver was last year when it was a lot of hype and a little bit of substance, and you have an older quarterback coming in and new coach, and obviously Nathaniel Hackett is kind of the bridge to both of those situations. But
Yeah.
I think people just believe that there might be a little bit overhyped there, especially considering the year that Aaron Rodgers had last year. But yeah, I think they're internally, I think they understand that what it takes to win a champion. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is as great as he is. He's only won one championship,
Yeah.
so they understand that it's not going to be easy, even if things fall in line and things of that nature. But yeah, it's a lot of work to be done. I think they've said that externally many times there, but yeah, I think they're remaining on the prize. I mean, obviously they don't necessarily want all the distractions. It's just everything when it comes with Aaron Rodgers. So you just kind of have to, at some point, just have to deal with it. That's just going to be what it is.
Yeah, totally agree. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. You mentioned Denver, obviously the whole Sean Payton comments. That's obviously created a lot of, a lot of talking points over the last couple of days with Rodgers and what he had to say. And it's been definitely week 5 is one to circle on the calendar without a doubt. So I just want to move on here to the running back room. Dalvin Cook was obviously in for a visit the other day on Sunday. Left without a contract, which I don't think many are too surprised with. But do you see him still being an option for the Jets, or do you see him probably going down to Miami? How do you see the whole Dalvin Cook situation unfolding after the visit on Sunday?
It's up to him. Totally up to him. I mean, it's an option. I mean, the Jets would like to happen, but it's totally up. The ball is in his court, basically. From what I understand, I used to cover the Dolphins and still have
Mm-hmm.
connections down there. I lived in Miami for many years. Obviously that's his first option. I mean, he's from
Yeah.
Miami originally, still lives in Fort Lauderdale. Even when he was in Minnesota, he still trained and worked in Fort Lauderdale throughout the off season. So bottom line is, yeah, he would love to play for the Dolphins. I mean, who wouldn't want to play for their hometown team? I
Yeah,
definitely,
exactly.
understand that. But I think also at the end of the day, it's still a business. The Dolphins are kind of playing. Chris Greer kind of playing hardball. I think they have a set amount that they would be willing to give Dalvin Cook, but I don't know if Dalvin is willing to accept that. Same thing with the Jets. If he came to the Jets, it'd definitely be a 1 year rental, simply because they have Brees Hall. Although
Mm-hmm.
running backs typically don't come back really well from ACL injuries after you know after the injury takes place less than a year. So yeah, I think ultimately Dalvin Cook will be a 1 year rental, and then he could go back to be a free agent next year and possibly make a ton of money. But yeah, the Jets is still open. The Jets are still entertaining the options, and it's something that they would desperately, well, especially considering their team that's going for it, especially when you go out and get
Mm-hmm.
Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, bringing another talented guy. I mean, as a fan, I'm definitely not opposed to it. And he's obviously a leadership role too in what is a very young running back room. And just kind of add on to that, if Cook does end up signing here, let's just say, who do you see as the odd man out of Michael Carter, Bam Knight, or the rookie Izzy?
If I had to guess, it'd probably be Michael Carter might get traded too. I mean, obviously, he was not happy about the situation anyway
Mm-hmm.
last year with James Robinson, and he expressed his, displeasures early on, and I don't think he would necessarily would like to have another situation like that where he would get less carries too. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think Bam is a good guy. Can play special teams there. Can do a variety of different roles. Izzy they just drafted. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
it's necessarily wise to get rid of somebody that's going to be there at least maybe like 4 years. And then obviously you're not getting rid of Brees Hall. So yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely think Michael Carter would probably be the odd man out in that situation.
Yeah, it's definitely be obviously interesting, but the 1-2 punch of Dalvin Cook and Brees Hall just gets a lot of us excited with obviously the potential there, and especially Dalvin Cook's track record. So definitely something to keep an eye on as the offseason and training camp rolls on, or training camp rolls on, because the offseason is really in the rear view now. Just quickly, I want to touch upon one receiver made a crazy catch today at camp. Jason Brownlee with the Mims trade, the 6th receiver spot obviously became open. Do you see him obviously just inserting in as a sixth receiver, but not even just as sixth receiver. Do you see his role maybe being even bigger this year with the way he's performed in camp as not just the sixth receiver, getting a much bigger role and a lot more opportunities with this team?
It's gonna be hard, especially considering their situation at the wide receiver position. Remember, you got Corey Davis, you got
Yeah.
obviously Garrett, and Mikael Hartman and Alan Lazar and Randall Cobb. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I think he's track to possibly make the roster. I just think it's as far as him getting the amount of touches, I don't know. Like that's gonna be hard, especially considering all the people that are in front of him,
Mhm.
and even for him to be active on most
Yeah.
Sundays too. I think it's gonna be very difficult. But everybody loves the training camp story about
Yeah.
the guy that comes in and produces throughout the preseason, and thinks they can make an impact. I think he can actually too, but I just think it's a situation where they may just they want to keep him on the roster sim because they don't want to put him on the practice squad. Because if you
Yeah.
put him on the practice squad, then somebody else will have an opportunity to pick him up. But yeah, I definitely think it's somebody that can grow and develop and hope they can, eventually become a solid player in this league. But I don't know how much I would expect him to produce this upcoming year. But he's been playing really well in training camp,
Mhm.
so that's definitely undeniable.
Yeah, he's definitely been fun to watch. And you kind of everybody kind of went in with a bunch of different guys that could potentially be that sixth receiver, and it's really just been it's not been that the other guys aren't playing well. Like you mentioned, he's just been so much fun to watch, and he's made so many of these big plays, especially today with the one-handed catch, which was the catch of camp. So it will be interesting to see how he does moving forward and throughout the rest of training camp. Um, Moving on here to kind of close out the offense before we go to the defense side of the football. The offensive line, when you look at this roster again, it's a very deep roster. There's so much talent everywhere. One of the bigger concerns is the offensive line, specifically the health and how all the pieces are going to end up falling in place. Becton, we'll start with him before we get to potentially what this O-line could look like, depending on the health of Dwayne Brown. But what have you seen from Becton? Has put together a nice couple days. Obviously spoke to you guys today. Just your expectations for Becton going into this season, obviously his first season, hopefully healthy since his rookie year.
I don't have any expectations, to be honest with you. I think for me, I think it'd be good for to have a depth piece there. To be
Mm,
quite honest with you, is talking about a guy that's coming off knee surgery
yeah,
twice in a row, and still working his way back to trying to get back to form. He hadn't played football really in like 2 years.
yeah,
To be completely honest, so this will be his first game since injuring that knee the first time against the Panthers back in 2021. So yeah, I think it's hard to. I think a lot of it'd be a great story if he was a start, but Dwayne Brown's going to be the starting left tackle. I mean, that's just what it's going to be, at least to start out with. Now, how that trends out, how that plays out throughout the course of the season, who knows? Injuries come about. The Jets had a ton of them on the offensive line last year, so yeah, I mean, I think he'll be a good depth piece to play either right or left tackle, especially when you also have Billy Turner. I think Matt Mitchell will probably start at right tackle, and then Dwayne Brown, eventually, whenever he comes back and starts practicing again, will be the left tackle.
yeah. That's what I also wanted to know too. Like, is there any kind of update on Dwayne Brown, or is he still? I know Salah's kind of been basically just said that he's coming back. He's working his way back, but is there any kind of expect or timeline on Dwayne Brown as to when he could return?
No, he's a veteran. I don't think he necessarily. He's 38. He'll be 38 years
Mhm.
old. I don't think he necessarily needs a lot of training camp.
Yeah,
But he came into camp last year, like halfway into August, and then I know he was hurt like initially,
yeah,
but he still played 12 games basically on one shoulder. So I don't think necessarily a guy like him, when you're a veteran like that, you really don't need a lot of
yeah,
training. So yeah, I don't
yeah.
think it's necessarily they're gonna really rush him back too quickly.
Yeah, definitely agree. Especially obviously he was on the team last year and played a definitely big role. And then kind of the final competition where it's center right now between Govern and it seems like Wes Schweitzer, but it seems like McGovern will probably win that, and then they will. It seems as if just going to use Titman this year as a developmental year, a year where he can sit and learn and watch and just develop and get ready for the future.
Yeah, I imagine so. I think it's hard anytime you come in, especially as a rookie, and then you got a veteran team that's ready to win. I think
Mhm.
a couple of years ago, yeah, Tippin might have. I don't know if he would have started, but he definitely would have been, at least the backup guy to McGovern. He still could be.
Yeah.
He might be late on the season, but I think when you have a situation where you're trying to win now and
Yeah.
you end up signing a veteran like re-signing like McGovern, I think it just makes more sense just to kind of go with that this year and then hope Tippett can develop and learn and grow from that, learn and grow throughout the year. So yes. It's a tough situation for any rookie to come in and at least start right away, especially a team that has high expectations like the Jets. So I think it's in best interest to have McGovern, patrol the center right now.
Yeah, definitely. And as you mentioned too, like the Jets don't have time right now to have a rookie go out there and struggle on the offensive line because they're in such a big spot to win and they're in a win now mode where you can't. It's unlike past years where they were able to put out rookies out there and go through the growing pains. So having McGovern, who's been with the team for a couple years now and has obviously got that veteran experience, is definitely, I think, the route to go, especially with the expectations around this team. So moving on to the defensive side of the football, you go to the defensive line, which unlike the offensive line, this is one of the strongest parts of the team. When you look at the additions of Al Woods and Quentin Jefferson, and they obviously added Will McDonald and in the draft, and you add that to already having Quentin Williams and JFM and Carl Lawson, just the defensive line is just so deep, one of the deepest in the NFL. Just your thoughts on how good this group can be and what they've shown so far throughout camp and how deep they are.
Yeah, I mean, I think you got Carlos to come up his second year from Achilles injury. I think that's big. I think he's really shown a lot too. I think Jermaine Johnson is somebody that's really
Yeah.
played really well throughout camp. Somebody that been kind of reminds me when he was back in his final year, his only year at Florida State. Really, that you kind of see that dominant guy, very confident coming off the edge. He's constantly getting pressure on Aaron Rodgers or whoever,
Mm.
or Zach Wilson or whoever the opposing quarterback is on the other side. So yeah, those guys have really stood out too. And I mean, you're not even talking about Michael Clemens, who
Yeah.
also somebody that can play in the inside and also the outside. He also beefed up there. I think he's going to play a lot more inside this upcoming year too, to go along with Al Woods, who's somebody that kind of run stopping guy.
Yeah.
To have to that defensive line, especially when you lose a guy like Sheldon Rankins, who really
Yeah.
did a lot this defense last year. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the strongest part of their defense too. And I think it's when you have a team that's good, you expect to have more leads this upcoming year. You're gonna have guys that can pin their ears back and go after the quarterback later on in the game. I think we kind of saw that against Buffalo. The first game against Buffalo last year too, when they were able to kind of do that and get some
Yeah.
pressure on Josh Allen. And I think when you have a deep unit like that, then yeah, that nobody's going to be tired necessarily at the end because it's going to be a good rotation of guys eating, throughout the whole course of the game.
Yeah, definitely. And I know the Quinnen contract's a little bit in the rear view, but just your thoughts on that deal and him going out last year and putting up 12 sacks and obviously now being a future. And do you feel like that shows too to the younger guys like Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner that with Joe Douglas and these pieces in place that they're going to lock up their own, which this team hasn't done in a very long time?
Well, I never thought it'd be a question. I just thought it'd be a matter of when, not if. I mean,
Mm.
they obviously value Quentin. He had a big year last year. He's one of the big key components to their defense in general. So yeah, I never questioned was he going to get signed. I just think people got upset. I think Quentin himself probably got a little upset because you have to
Yeah.
look at it from their perspective. I mean, they had to take care of the quarterback situation with Aaron Rodgers, and once they did that and got that settled, then now you turn your attention to Quentin Williams there after getting Rodgers and then the draft too. So it was like a kind of a pecking order of things they kind of had to take care of.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, I never questioned whether they're going to re-sign Quentin at all. I kind of obviously having inside information, but I also
Yeah.
kind of knew that they were going to re-sign him, just without that.
Yeah. And especially after the monster season that he had and second year in solid system, it all was kind of just lining up for that to take place. So moving on to the linebackers, and then we'll get to Tony Adams, who's very, very impressive, and we'll close things out. Obviously, Quan Alexander signed with the Steelers, which means your three linebackers are going to be Quincy Williams, C.J. Mosley, and then Jamie and Sherwood. Can you just speak upon the linebacker core and obviously Jamie and Sherwood this year, who will be starting after being a depth piece without Quan coming back? He'll obviously be out there in the starter role, and kind of what have you seen from him so far in camp?
I think I know him and Nasadine are going for it, competing wise. At least that's what they're saying on the surface. But it seemed like Sherwood probably would be. Seemed like the guy that's got to be have the advantage to win that. And he's had some ups and downs too. I think linebacking core is kind of, if you had to look at a weaker piece on the defense, is probably that too. You do have the general and C.J. Mosley, the ageless one, who's still one of the best linebackers in the league. There, Quincy had a
Hmm.
I think really good season because considering the fact that I don't know, I was nobody really expected that year to happen last year for him, and of course they re-signed him this year. So yeah, I think those two are solid. Obviously, CJ more so than Quincy, but yeah, I think
Hmm.
that's probably a bit of a weak spot for him, and we won't know until they allow bullets start going and we see what they do in the games.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely think. Yeah, it's still a big question there how that's going to turn out too.
Yeah, definitely. And you nailed it right on the head. I mean, you're spot on with the Jamin Sherwood. Like we saw a little bit out of him last year, but it's not a ton. So it's definitely a group with some questions, and you really won't tell until the season begins, and especially early on. Got some tough matchups. So we'll see what takes place there for the linebacker group. But finish things out here to close things out. Tony Adams. We've talked about Jermaine Johnson. Obviously, there's been a lot of positives with the offense and Rodgers and Jason Brownlee. Tony Adams has been one of the top guys in camp so far. Had an interception yesterday. Just continues to impress with the speed and the ability and coverage. This was a guy that Salah talked up a little bit last year. Didn't play much, obviously. Played a little bit. Now really seems like he could be heading as a starter role. I mean, he's been so good. What have you seen from Tony Adams in this big jump he's made in training camp?
Well, I just think he's always around the ball. Like just been consistent, batting balls down, and making plays in the secondary too. And we know the safety position was a big question with this team last year, to be quite honest with you. And yeah, you go up and you get a guy like Chuck Clark too, and hopefully
Yeah.
he can improve your unit. And honest sometimes those type of injuries. Not I don't think anybody wanted obviously Clark to get hurt, but it could kind of be
Yeah.
a squads because
Yep.
you have a young
Definitely.
guy that can come in and produce and and then you have somebody locked in for your future as opposed to just kind of stopgap guy, which I think Clark was going to be this upcoming year. So yeah, I thought I thought safety might be a position they might look at in the draft. Obviously,
Hmm.
they didn't necessarily take one early on. So yeah, I definitely think they have faith in Adams. I think he was put in a position where maybe he's starting a little bit quicker than they
Yeah.
anticipated, but he's been producing out there on the practice field. So again, it's gonna be one of those situations. He did play a lot. He played a little bit late last year, so we'll see how things transpire, especially when you get in the live game action. I'm curious to see if he can continue the momentum, get in the live practices against Carolina and Tampa Bay.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You're right on there with I didn't expect this coming. I was one who wanted them to go out and sign, maybe make a little bit of a splash in safe at the safety spot, but they didn't. And obviously Chuck Clark signing, and it stinks to see him go down. But like you mentioned, blessing in disguise. You see what Tony Adams has been able to do. Joint practices will obviously be big, but he's definitely been very impressive, and it's been cool to see. A young guy step up and play well. So that kind of does it here. Just to close things out, tell everybody where they can find you. Your work obviously on the New York Daily News and social media and all that good stuff. Where can people see you at on online?
But basically, just my name, Antwan Staley, just like that, all together on all the social media platforms. So just follow me there, follow my work at the New York Daily News, and yeah, that's really about it. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate this. Had a lot of fun talking all things New York Jets. As always, hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for listening.